Hello friends, I welcome you all to my channel. As you know that I have previously started a lecture series on ecosystem, and today as a part of this lecture series I am going to discuss food web. In the previous lecture I have discussed about the food chain, types of food chains and their importance, and today I am going to discuss what is food web, what are importances of food web and applications of as well as its types. Dear friends, we all know that ecosystem is an interactive system where there is the interaction between the living and non-living components of ecosystem, and then there is a flow of energy and cycle of materials. We have discussed it in the previous lectures, and we have also discussed the process of the energy, how energy flows from one trophic level to another trophic level, and till now we have come across with the unidirectional flow of energy. Today in this topic we will discuss about how food chains, one or more food chains, are interacting with each other and interconnected at different points, or we can say different trophic levels. So before starting, if you are new to this channel, kindly subscribe this channel for the new updates, new lectures on the environmental sciences. Well, the concept of a food web, previously known as food cycle, is typically credited to Charles Elton, who first introduced it in his book Animal Ecology, which was published in 1927. There are so many definitions of the food web, and here I have put an practical and most important definition of the food web, that is, the different food chains are interconnected at various trophic levels to develop a food web. This definition has cited and appreciated by the various ecologists in their findings, and this definition has got much attention and much relevance as compared to various typical definitions. In complex natural communities, the food chains are not found in isolation. They are all interconnected with each other, since most consumers have multiple sources and many species prey to several predators and parasites. Such interlocking food chain is called food web. As it is depicted in the picture, there are some prey which have different predators, and in this picture if we come across that an organism get different options for feeding as compared to food chain. In a food chain there is only one option, that is in which run in a unidirectional flow, and as compared to that, if you look on this, each organism has different options for feeding. And in this interlocking system, or we can say interconnected system of different trophic levels and different organisms within and among them, is known as food web. Well, we have one more example of the grassland ecosystem. Grass is consumed by rabbit, but in their absence it may be eaten by the grazing cattle. Similarly, rat or mouse is eaten by snake, but snake can be eaten by predatory birds, as depicted in this picture. Here again, if we say that if we have already discussed in the previous slide that every organism has different options of food feeding, and this interlocking feeding system or interconnected feeding system, it gives a complex food chain that is known as food web, or previously called as a food cycle. In a food web, organisms are arranged accordingly to their trophic level. The trophic level for an organism refers to how it fits within the overall food web and is based on how an ecosystem feels. Let us contrast food web and food chain on the basis of certain pointers. Number 1. Food web are never straight. In comparison, food chains are straight. Food web is formed due to interlocking of food chains, 1, 2 or more food chains, which are making interlocking system, and that gives the shape of food web. And the number 3rd important point is a food web in the ecosystem brings alternate sources of food. That means which we have already discussed, that every organism at different feeding levels have more than one options of feeding. Dear friends, it was concept of the food web. Now let us proceed with the importances of food web. The complex food web gives better stability to the ecosystem. Most of the animals are polyphagous and they feed on more than one kind of organisms. If the availability of one particular animal is decreasing in the ecosystem, they start eating alternate animal. As a result, it gives chance to other animals to reproduce and grow in number, and in addition, it gives chance to predator to survive. One more importance is that food webs can also help us study and explain how the diversity of species is related to how they fit within the overall food dynamic. They may also reveal critical information about the relationships between invasive species and those native to a particular ecosystem. Dear friends, let's talk about types of food web. In food web, we have different types of food webs. Among them, let's talk first connectance food webs. In a connectance food web, scientists use arrows to show one species being consumed by another species, as depicted in the picture. All of the arrows are equally weighted. The degree of the strength of the consumption of one species by another is not depicted. Interaction food webs. This is the second type of food web known as interaction food webs. These interaction food webs are similar to connectance food webs. Here, scientists also use arrows in the interaction food webs to show one species being consumed by another species. However, the arrows used are weighted to show the degree or strength of consumption of one species by another species. The arrows depicted in such an arrangement can be wider, broader, or darker to denote the strength of consumption. If one species typically consumes another, if the interaction between the species is very weak, the arrow can be narrow or not present. This is one of the difference between the interconnection and connectance food web. Well, here's the best example of interaction food web. This is the interaction food web of an aquatic ecosystem. The solid arrows represent direct effectors and dashed arrows indirect effectors. The nature of the effect is indicated by plus or minus. If you look here in this picture, fish have indirect effects through a trophic cascade on several terrestrial species like dragon rattlefly, which is indicated by the negative pollinator and positive, and Plantus also positive. These are the direct and these are indirect effects. Similarly, in another ecosystem, there are well interconnected interaction food webs which are represented by different animals, and that is a bit difficult to understand as compared to aquatic ecosystem. That is why I have cited here only one pictorial example of aquatic ecosystem. We have one more type of food web, that is fossil food web. Fossil food webs can be dynamic and the food relationships within an ecosystem change over time. In a fossil food web, scientists attempt to reconstruct the relationships between species based on the available evidence from the fossil records. Functional food webs are one more type of food web. In these functional food webs, these depict the relationships between the organisms in an ecosystem by depicting how different populations influence the growth rate of other populations within the environment. Examples of the fossil food webs. This is a 3D visualization of the food web of the Little Rock Lake in the Wisconsin. In this food web, there has been shown 181 nodes and 2,375 links. The network shows strong connectivity. Average links per node incoming and outgoing is 26. And this is one more example of fossil food web. These nodes also represent different trophic levels and different organisms which are present on those trophic levels. Well, here is a comparative pictorial example of connectance food web, energy flow food web, and functional food web. Dear friends, let's lastly talk about the applications of food webs. We know that as we have already discussed that in a food web, every organism has multiple options of the feeding, and due to the having multiple options of the feeding, there is a rise of different ecological importance of certain examples, or it may give us the chances to survive of the some sensitive species, and thereby these food webs becomes the more important and can move much attention as compared to food chains. Here I am going to discuss some important applications of the food chain. Among them, first of all, I am going to discuss about the food webs are constructed to describe species interactions, or we can say direct relationships. The fundamental purpose of food webs is to describe feeding relationship among species in a community. Food webs can be constructed to describe the species interactions. All species in the food web can be distinguished into basal species, that is autotrophs such as plantus, intermediate species such as herbivores, and intermediate level carnivores such as grasshopper and another carnivores, or if we can example of the top carnivores, that is the high level of the carnivores such as focus. The second major application of the food web is Food webs can be used to illustrate indirect relationships among species. Indirect interactions occur when two species do not interact with each other directly, but influenced by a third species. Species can influence one another in many different ways. One more application of the food web is that food webs can be used to study bottom-up or top-down control of the community structure. As per these food webs illustrate energy flow from primary producers to primary consumers, that is herbivores, and from primary consumers to secondary consumers, that is carnivores. The structure of the food web suggests that productivity and abundance of populations at any given trophic level are controlled by productivity and abundance of population in the trophic level below them. This phenomenon is called bottom-up control. Correlations in the abundance or productivity in any ecosystem between consumers and their resources are considered as evidence of bottom-up control. For example, plant population densities, which can be controlled by the abundance of the herbivores population, which in turn control the density of the carnivores populations. Thus, the biomass of herbivores usually increase with primary productivity in terrestrial ecosystems. Similarly, top-down control occurs when the population density of a consumer can control that of its resource. For example, predator population can control the abundance of prey species. And the last applicability of the food web is food webs can be used to reveal different patterns of energy transfer in terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems. Patterns of energy flow through different ecosystems may differ markedly in terrestrial as well as in aquatic ecosystems. Food webs, that is energy flow, can be used to reveal these differences. With this, I have completed this lecture. Hope you like this lecture and you will subscribe this channel for the next upcoming lectures. Attention and your time. Let us meet in another lecture with some different topic. I hope you like this lecture and you will subscribe this channel for more updates and new lectures in the environmental science. Thank you once again.